Well, welcome back, everybody. It's nice to see a lot of familiar names popping up in the chat. And we have another exciting day planned for you today. So I'd like to take just a few minutes to introduce Missy Holzer, who is a new facilitator for Nesta, who's online, and Missy will be with us the rest of the week. Missy is the Nesta secretary. And also online today facilitating, we have Peg Steffen, myself, and Kristen Metzger, who was here yesterday as well. So as before, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll be watching for them and deal with them as we're able to do. So I'd like to begin today by talking a few minutes about some of the good comments and questions that you put yesterday into your additional questions box or your form on the website. And I wanted to address some of the questions that you brought up. And so one of them I'd like to start with is talking a little bit about some of you have noticed that in some of our investigations, we have kind of questions that seem to come out of the blue. Like you've made a comment about, wow, we never heard that before. We never talked about that before. It wasn't explained before. And yes, you will see those questions, and there's two reasons they're there. First of all, one of them is that we have designed these as drop-in lessons, and because they're drop-in lessons and not units, we're not making an attempt to explain every possible amount of background knowledge a student might need to have in order to do the investigation. What we have done is we've been very intentional about listing in the teacher guide the prerequisite knowledge that we expect students to come in with. So for instance, yesterday, the prerequisite knowledge was that they had an understanding of redshifts already. This wasn't a brand new concept to them, that they know something about gravitational interactions already. And so because we're not giving you a lot of time to read through the teacher guide before the investigations, that might not be entirely obvious to you. But we have thought about what is it your students need to know before you launch this particular lesson. The second reason we bring in some of these questions that seem in one sense not addressed earlier is we're trying to tie together those big cross-cutting concepts in science. And when we do that, we try to follow a scaffolded reasoning approach by developing a series of questions to bring students to successful conclusions or successful answers. But certainly if you see anything that seems incongruous to you, please keep bringing them up. As I said, your honesty and your level of detail are very important to us. We care a lot about what you say, and we certainly will consider every single comment that we get from you. Another question that came up yesterday is, can we take the video we saw on the Hoberman sphere, put it into Edpuzzle and have a voice overdone? I am not familiar with Edpuzzle, but I can tell you this. All of the materials we produce are Creative Commons. So as long as you give credit to Rubin Observatory, Aura, you should be fine with being able to do that as long as Edpuzzle is not a commercial venture where you're making money by doing that. So I'm not exactly sure how it works, but as long as you're just reusing our material and giving us credit, you should be fine with that. Another question that came up is, can students select their own data, or will the data be in preset groupings? Right now, no, they cannot select their own data, and we don't really have plans to do that. The data that we use has to be a little bit pre-processed and curated in order to drop into these investigations. But it's all real, it's all authentic. In fact, sometimes I forget that it's authentic because it seems to work so well, it seems like a simulation and not real data. But what we are going to be able to do, as I mentioned yesterday, is in the future, everybody should have their own data set. And it might be possible, if you would prefer, to assign a data set to a group instead of to an individual. But we don't have any design plans for students to pick out their own data and analyze only that. And part of it is that we just have a lot of data that we're going to be dealing with. somebody mentioned that Arizona State University had a nice lab where students can move through a 3D version of the Hubble Deep Field. We actually looked at that, and when we started thinking about how many objects for each image we would have to map to in order to let students select randomly, it was just not feasible, because our images will have a lot more depth than the Hubble Deep Field in terms of not depth, I should say, a lot more breadth, a lot more objects in each field. It just might not be possible. Another question that came up: how do we know the universe is not contracting? Wouldn't all the red and blue shifts look exactly the same if the universe were contracting instead of expanding? So I'm not a cosmology expert, but from my understanding, we would not see red shifts if the universe is contracting. Instead, we would see blue shifts of galaxies.
That's right.
Right, okay. So we do see some local blue shifts, and that's because within our local group, within our local family of galaxies, the overriding effect of gravity causes galaxies to be able to move toward each other. For instance, a lot of you know that the Andromeda galaxy and the Milky Way galaxy are getting closer together. But once we get out of our local gravitational group and get into the Hubble flow, we see that all galaxies are expanding away from us. They're all showing red shifts. And then there's another question, which I think is something that comes up a lot in class, and that is a question about there not being a center of the universe. Is it true there's no center to the universe? Ought there to be a center, even though we can't determine where it was or is? The way I've said this to my students, which is very unsatisfactory, and I invite all of you to join in with your own thoughts on chat, is the universe began everywhere at once. So before the universe, there was no space. So there wasn't a location for it to start from. Of course, that's mind-blowing right there. But we don't see, the whole point of that Hubble plot yesterday was to show that no matter what galaxy you move to, we see the universe expanding away in the same way. And so this was intentional to get students to start thinking about, well, if it doesn't matter where I am and everything seems to be expanding away from me regardless of where I am, then that sort of says there's no center to the universe. Have time for just a few more questions here. And if I haven't addressed your questions and you really need an answer, I will try to get to them in the next days, but I'm trying to pick out the ones that I think are probably the most pertinent. The next question is, are there going to be answer keys provided in the final teacher materials? And the answer is no, except for the pretest post-test. And the reason is that every student will have a unique data set. So we can't get really specific in answers for a certain set of data they'll analyze, but also we develop a lot of open-ended questions here where there isn't one particular right answer or right way to answer it. We assume that you as the professional do have enough background knowledge where you can evaluate an answer and say, yes, that's satisfactory, or no, it is not. And the last question I'll mention right now is that, oh, no, I guess I answered that question. So we do have a couple minutes that I could take a few more questions if anything else has shown up in chat.
Oh, sorry, just we have a few questions here.
Great.
So one from Pooja, it's, do we have to submit the task we did yesterday?
No, you don't. That's simply for you. And I'll point out that there's one of those for each day. So you are welcome at your leisure to work through some of the other ones if you'd like to see what they are and how they work. But because we have such limited time together, we've chosen each day to just focus on a few components. But we've provided the information for each day in terms of the supporting materials for each investigation.
Questions. One from Teresa is asking, will the VRO products be 508 compliant, accessible for hearing and visually impaired students?
I do not know all of the details in that, but I know that we are following the accessibility guidelines from ADA. And so we are working on things for at least, I think we'll certainly fulfill the minimum requirements. And I wanted to address something else I heard a few of you talking about yesterday as I was going between breakout rooms. We realize right now that color choices are not going to be compliant for people who are color impaired. And this is one of the things that we will go back and address in styling when we get to that level. So we're very well aware of that, you know, like the blue-green problem, et cetera, and we will go back and address that.
And then we have one more question from Kevin. He was asking, what is the source of the data in the investigations we are using now? Is the data publicly available for use until the full investigations become available with VRO data?
For each investigation, we have different data sets that we're using. So, you know, for the solar system investigation, we have different sets. I think the set of data you're working with today is from the dark energy survey, but I am not positive, and I'd have to go back and check with our staff astronomer. If that's something you would like to know, we can go back and we can make a note of it in each teacher guide if you'd like to know where our data comes from each time, until we have our own.
And then finally, one more question from David. Is anyone preparing a time-lapse video of the construction of the observatory? That would be interesting.
I'm going to kick that to Kristen because she's in communications and she'll be able to answer it.
I can absolutely answer that. Yeah, we have Earth cams on the summit of Cerro Pachon, and they are taking regular pictures, and there will be a pretty cool, once we're done with construction, a pretty cool video of the, I think the entire, not the entire construction, but you know, like the bulk of the construction project. It'll be great.
Artists, I think we're clear with questions from the chat box.
Okay, great, thank you. So before we do our speaker today, we have a little task for you. You know, yesterday you looked at an open-ended assessment after you worked through your investigation together. And today we're going to work through the pre-test post-test. Now, the pre-test post-test is the exact same test that we give before and after an investigation. It's designed to be short. It's multiple choice. A lot of you like that because you can work statistically with it very easily, and it's very easy to grade. I've set this pre-test post-test up, so you should see some analytics about how people are answering. But what I would like you to do right now is go to the meeting page, look under the resources section, and you will see something in bold called pre-test post-test. We're going to give you a little time, and we'd like you to just take that test and then wait till everybody's ready, and we'll move on from there. So has everyone found where it is? Would you like me to share my screen? Okay, I think we're good. So we'll give you a few minutes to do that.